Hey fam, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another reading of The Sound of Gravel. It's the same day for me, a different day for you. I'm in a much better mood because I just had myself some rice and peas with some jerk chicken and some yam and cabbage. And I am nice and full. I need to do some running around after this because snow may be coming. And I'm hoping to get snowed in. Like, do enough so I don't have to go to work and it can be, me being off on their dime. That would be great. Thank you in advance. The things we hope for. Let's breathe, you guys. Let's prepare ourselves for another chapter. This is chapter 32. Go ahead, do me a favor and hit the like button. Do y'all like my bookmark? Yeah. My man loves these and I use them as bookmarks. Anyways, here we are. Let's go. Just like that, we were finally a family again, as Mom put it, which in our case meant spending the next 2 years in a whirlwind of moving from one place to another. Mom would say it was too hard to survive in LeBaron with the newly devalued pesos, and suddenly we would head for Albuquerque or El Paso. We'd follow Lane around for months, living in campers and trailers as he failed again and again and again to make money hauling loads in a semi. I avoided him, and mostly he left me alone. What does mostly mean? That implies that there's times where he bothered her. We even lived in San Diego with Matt for a few months. Then, just as predictably, Mom would grow tired of moving around or become preoccupied with Babylon's bankrupt morality, and she would move us back home to LeBaron. In the midst of all this ping-ponging back and forth between two countries, we added a new member to the family, Leah. Or is it Leia? It might be Leia, L-E-A. Leia was born in the summer of 1985. When I was 13 years old, Mom named her after Grandpa. She said the baby was as stubborn as her father, Leo. Leia looked just like Micah had when he was a baby. Another snowman child with invisible lashes and brows. My son had the prettiest, and he still has, the prettiest, longest eyelashes. Really, really dark black hair. It was straight. It ain't straight no more. I mean, he has locks, but it was straight, like, and so pretty and so alert. He was a beautiful baby. Anyways, so hearing that you couldn't really see, those, but anyway. The following year, we finally settled back in LeBaron for good, according to Mom. Matt, then 17, was still living in California, but he would come down to visit every now and then. I was 14, but no longer in school. Mom insisted that it was more important for me to be around to help her take care of the house and the kids. Aaron was 9 years old and in the 3rd grade. Micah, kind and quiet, followed Aaron around constantly, trying to do everything his older brother did. Elena had grown into an adorable and intelligent 3-year-old. At a year old, Leia was the baby in the family. She had started walking before she was even a year old and was a curious child. She followed me from room to room, desperate to know what I was doing and wanting to explore everything she could. Even though he was allowed to live in LeBaron again, Lynn continued to work odd jobs in the States. With her 7 children more or less settled wherever we were, Matt in California, Audrey in the state hospital, and the rest of us on the farm, Mom started accompanying Lay on more and more of his trips, making Ruthie basically responsible for these kids. She'd leave home for a long weekend and put me in charge. Luke, at 16, was still wandering off and getting lost in the Mexican countryside or going with brothers or cousins to work with them on their farms. Despite his handicaps, he was the strongest and most athletic of all of Mom's children. He became a helpful worker on my relatives' farms where he loaded hay or cleaned corrals for a few pesos a day. He couldn't drive because he began having light seizures that caused his body to tremble and his hands to lose control of whatever they were holding. He also lacked the hand-eye coordination needed to pop a clutch and shift gears or to brake while keeping the steering wheel straight. But he was gentle and loving. He adored animals so much so that he refused to eat meat. His eyes would fill with tears whenever anyone talked about butchering cattle or when Mom killed a chicken for supper. Her few attempts at getting Luke to eat meat failed. He would retch and spit it back out onto his plate. Most days, Luke would find his way home after work, but if I hadn't seen him by sunset, I'd go looking for him. One Saturday evening in June, when Mom and Leah were in El Paso visiting Lane, and it was late and Luke hadn't yet come home, I fired up Lane's Datsun pickup, a beat-up old truck that he left on the farm as its bed was often stacked with bales of hay. I couldn't drive on the highway. The truck didn't have a front windshield, and I didn't have a license, but that didn't stop me from searching every dirt road in the colony. I drove off the farm to go look for my brother. The sky was ablaze in spectacular shades of orange, red, and plum. The warm wind blew in my face. I spotted Luke on the gravel road that led to our house, and when I stopped to let him in, he wore a goofy smile, as if he were the happiest boy on the planet. His messy hair was peppered with dry yellow hay. He had hit dirt. He had dirt underneath his fingernails and embedded in his cuticles, and fresh mud was on the bottoms of his tennis shoes. I wanted to tell him to brush himself off before getting in the truck, but then I realized the truck was even filthier than he was. The sherbet sky faded into the darkness as my tires splashed through the wide, shallow ditch at the foot of our long driveway. The lights in the house were already on, and the door to the kitchen was wide open, allowing the light from inside to illuminate a nighttime game of marbles outside in the dirt. I parked a few feet from the three little figures huddled over a crooked circle with their faces close to the ground. I watched Aaron flick a marble at Micah's with his thumb. Elena was only 3 years old and didn't have any of her own marbles, but she knelt next to the 4-year-old Micah anyway, not being the sort to let those details stand in the way of her participation. Their eyes followed Aaron's marble as it struck the last marble and knocked it outside of the circle. I turned off my headlights as Micah squeezed his eyes closed and threw his head back. "Oh, man," he sighed with a shy smile. "That was my last marble." "Time to go inside," I said, as I shut the rickety truck door. Micah followed Aaron through the kitchen threshold with his head lowered and his hands buried deep inside his empty pockets. Micah was the quietest child in our whole brood, almost the most tender-hearted and sensitive, a lot like the way Grandma had described Mom as a little girl. Both were background figures, the unsqueaky wheels in their families. In a family where meekness was discouraged in males, my heart went out to Micah, and I found myself being overprotective of him in a way I hadn't been with my other siblings. Luke, Audrey, and Mary all had crosses to bear, but Micah seemed fragile in a different way. I would watch him through the window while he rode his little blue bike or wrap him in a towel after his bath to keep him from touching the electrified water pipe. It made me nervous when he and his siblings went swimming in the ditches and springs near our house, even though I knew that his older brothers usually watched out for him. But my number one worry was Luke. The other children listened and remembered when I told them not to touch something. He didn't, and he was always getting shocked, and not just in the shower. Our property was a minefield with clusters of bare wires visible everywhere, some even sprouting up from the ground like flower stems without blossoms. Once my bare foot was shocked when I was hanging laundry on the clothesline in our side yard, just outside the kitchen door. I stopped walking barefoot outside from that moment forward. On those weekends, I was left in charge. I'd put dinner on the table and sit with my siblings as they ate. Once I was sure that no one had shocked him or herself in the shower, I sometimes go out for the evening, put an errand in charge. I was 14 years old and wanted nights out with my friends. Like Mom, I often felt the need to escape motherhood's heavy responsibilities and uncertainties. Only difference is she's not a mom, she's a child, but she's, having to do certain things. What is it? Parentification? That's what it is. Most of my friends were related to me in some way. I hung out with my half siblings, stepsisters, and cousins, and I even had aunts and uncles who were my age. I had a few local Mexican friends too. Most of us went to church on Sunday mornings, but on weekends, we didn't have a wedding or rodeo to attend. We went dancing at discotecas and casas. Because we were fundamentalists and had grown up in the church, our parents trusted us. We had a lot of freedom because our parents were often working or traveling in the States. There were already so many young kids in the colony. By the time we were teenagers, no one was watching us closely. Drinking alcohol was a big part of the Mexican culture that surrounded the colony, and it seeped its way into our nightlife. Some members of our church never drank alcohol, but others served it at their weddings and parties. Mom always taught my siblings and me that Dad wasn't a fanatic. He felt his followers and his children would find joy in making righteous choices the way he always did, and thought they should be allowed to make choices for themselves. Mom and Lane never drank, but that didn't stop me. I was drawn to other teenagers who went out a lot and drank alcohol. It was easy to buy, inexpensive, and I was never carded. Mom would have had a fit if she had known my friends and I were drinking, but it was easy to hide it from her. It's funny because the first time I had a drink, I was in college. No, it was not legal. I was underage. I was a freshman. And it got to the point where we would pay the homeless people money to go and get us a drink. It sounds terrible, but that's what we did, right? So when I turned 21 and I was finally old enough to go get it myself, I was so disappointed, you guys, because they didn't even card me. So I said that whole time we were, paying, homeless people on the street to go get it, or random people on the street to go get it, I could have got it. Now you got a nerve to try to card me now. But I'm just saying, this is a thing that was going on. On nights I was out with friends, I was always the designated driver, which didn't mean that I didn't drink. It just meant that I was the one with the truck. Oh, Lord. I drive all over the colony and pick up friends along the way, as many teens as the cab and bed would hold. We listened to Don Henley's The Boys of Summer on my handheld cassette player while making our way to a dried up riverbed about a mile outside of LeBaron. To most of the colony, the riverbed was a dumping ground, a place to unload garbage, park rusted, broken down cars, and leave old tires. For my friends and me, it was a place without limitations, where a 14-year-old girl could do donuts in a pickup truck while she and her friends drank cheap Presidente brandy with Coke and a wedge of lime. My friends and I took turns behind the wheel, practicing peeling out and driving on and off roads, creating clouds of dust when we spun our wheels. We turned our headlights off and speed through the dark under the crescent moonlight, tempting fate on the rugged terrain. Once or twice, barely escaping serious accidents because of the huge holes in the ground that were big enough to swallow up the small truck. Then we parked the truck at the riverbed and finish off the bottle of Presidente with lukewarm Cokes. My friends and I would drink and talk late into the night about our crushes and love interests. From there, the conversations often turned to who would get married next. Some of my friends were already engaged to their teenage sweethearts and planning weddings, and our opinions on polygamy. What about your opinions on polygamy? Don't say. We knew that it was a cornerstone, of church doctrine, something that our parents believed in fervently, but most of us rejected it. A few young girls happily anticipated their futures as polygamous wives to older men, but they were the exception. Most of my friends thought it repellent that the boys we had crushes on would end up marrying us and someone else. We wanted lives more like those we saw on TV, which had made its way to us despite our parents' best efforts to shield us from the influence of pop culture. But our rebellion against polygamy came from another source too. Nearly all of us have witnessed our mother's jealousy, their jealous fits, and conflicts with sister wives, which had done nothing to improve our opinion of the practice. After an evening of such a cathartic discussion, I would drive everyone home and then return to my own house, still half drunk. My siblings would be in the bed, asleep in their clothes, their feet and hands dusty from playing outside all day. One night, as my tired, drunken head hit the cold pillow, my brothers and sisters breathing slowly, snoring, or talking in their sleep in the next room, I heard a roar of thunder in the distance and became consumed by the thought of how vulnerable my siblings were with me in charge, of how vulnerable we all were in a house where bent nails were what protected us from a stranger's invasion, where if we experienced any sort of emergency, the nearest telephone was a mile away. I tried to quiet my mind with a silent prayer for protection. A lightning bolt lit up the room, and I shrieked. Driving rain began to pelt our tar and gravel roof, and I heard the usual dripping sound in the kitchen. A puddle had already developed on the kitchen floor by the time I put the milk bucket under the hole in the ceiling. I felt cold drops land on my arm, then felt my own tears on my cheeks. I stood there a moment, listening to myself whimper, and then I heard something else, the sound of bare feet in the hall. Micah's face appeared in the doorway. He stared at me, wordlessly shivering. "What are you doing out of bed?" I asked. What is it? I'm scared of the dark, said the little boy voice. And not for the first time. Nights like this in the past, stormy nights, had sent Micah running into Mom's room and climbing into her bed. She'd always swiftly sent him back to his room. Letting a child sleep with you, she said, would spoil him. Still, whenever Mom said no to Micah, appealed to me, I defied her. I couldn't stand to see him scared, couldn't bear to see the part of me that was in him seeking comfort. Thunder roared through the sky again that night, and the rain dripped from the kitchen ceiling. Micah ran to me, threw his arm around my legs, and almost knocked me down. Please. Come on, I scooped him up. I scooped Micah up and carried him into Mom's bed with me. I'm scared too. As I pulled the covers up and let Micah settle in next to me, I heard Mom's voice in my ears. Children need to get used to being in the dark. She repeated that countless times throughout my childhood. No, I thought, they don't. That's the most easiest chapter I've read thus far, because the past couple ones have been rough, right? So yeah, okay. Chapter 33. By the end of the summer, Mom was spending more time with us. Oh, surprise there. I wondered if she and Lane had been fighting, or better yet, contemplating a breakup. Suzanne, Sally, and Cynthia's mom had decided to divorce him, despite having given birth to 3 of his children, although he did not let go of the marriage easily. Mom noted that Lane spent more time fixing up Suzanne's house and working on her car in the days after their separation than before, as though he was trying to prove his worth. But Suzanne had enough. Not only had he abused her daughters, she said he couldn't support her family, just as he hadn't been able to support us. The fact that he abused her daughter should have been enough, but whatever. You adding those other points like that matters to me. I don't care about this stuff. I care about the fact that he abused his daughters. I hope that Mom might follow Suzanne's lead, but in early July, Mom announced she was pregnant again. And I realized then that she was never going to leave Lane. Midsummer signaled the return of the LeBaron social season, which included bridal showers, weddings, and baby showers. It was customary for mothers and daughters to attend these events together, and in spite of our differences, Mom and I enjoyed going to celebrate with our friends and family. This festive time was full of family reunions, campouts, and rodeos at ranches on the outskirts of the colony. To my astonishment, Mom made good on her promise to keep Lane at a distance from me, and for a brief period I felt a cloud of darkness clear from my life. I began to relish some of my family duties, such as baking cakes for all the birthdays in our house. I also spent a lot more time with my friends, traveling to dance halls and discotheques and larger towns further away. We never came home until the first signs of morning light appeared in the sky. Mom was either oblivious to my nocturnal activities or chose not to ask. She and I didn't ask each other about much of anything anymore. July 9th was my father's birthday, and the church held its annual conferences. Firstborners made pilgrimages to the colony from all over the United States. For one weekend, the potholed gravel roads of LeBaron would swarm with new modeled American trucks and healthy and happy young men who'd driven down to Chihuahua to court girlfriends and visit their families. As our family grew, so did the others in the colony, and by that summer, the colony was crawling with teenagers, which meant more weddings and parties. I found myself more excited than I had been in the years past, if only because I was finally old enough to be invited to all the celebratory events. The weekend of the annual church conference, Mom and I walked to the morning church service together, then attended a barbecue, lunch at the home nearby. That night, a dance was held back at church. The black benches had been pushed against the walls, and the Norteño, Norten, squiggly line, O, band, a drummer, two guitarists, a keyboardist, and an accordionist set up under the large photo of my father on the wall. As soon as they started playing ranchera music, the whole room began to dance. I noticed a young man in the band new. Okay, I'm gonna try this again. I noticed a young man in a brand new black cowboy hat and tight Wrangler jeans, his leather cowboy boots freshly shined, his shoulders square, and his back straight. He spun around almost as if he realized he was being watched and motioned for me to come over. It was my brother Matt. He'd come straight to the dance from San Diego without even calling Maudie's ahead of time. I couldn't believe the transformation in him. Though he was only 17 years old, he had established himself as a hardworking kid at construction sites all over Southern California. By all accounts, he seemed poised to become an American success story. I hurried toward him, but then I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. Matt was standing next to a young woman, and the two of them were holding hands. She wore a tight-fitting red dress and black high heels, a banana comb elegantly sweeping up her hair, and a long, thick strands of loose curls fell around her bare shoulders. It was Maria. I couldn't help but stare. Why was she holding Matt's hand? What? Was my brother courting my stepsister? Was the world passing me by? Before I could go over and ask Matt what was going on, someone grabbed me by the arm. Anthony, one of my half-brothers, who was 3 months younger than me, was my regular dance partner at these types of events. Anthony had been born just a few days before our dad died. His mother was in the hospital when she heard the news that her husband had been murdered. I wanted to talk to Matt and thought about shrugging Anthony off, but I knew that would be rude. Besides, he was fun. Aggressive dancer who loved being on the floor as much as I did. Before I could blink, Anthony's arm was behind my back, my hand was behind his neck, and our free arms were raised straight over our heads. The fast waltz sent us swirling and spinning, knocking into a few annoyed couples and stepping on a multitude of toes. It was like being in your own tilt-a-whirl, and just so much fun. When the song ended, I was out of breath and ready for a break. I don't know why, but when she said that, I just see like Cody, when Cody was spinning Christine and them all around when they did their ceremony outside, and how like he was flinging them like he was about to break off their arms. That's what I thought of in that moment. I also needed to adjust my too tight acid wash jean skirt. I stood there a moment, noticing that Mom was sitting alone, watching something intently. I followed her gaze reluctantly, sure she would be peering at Lane, who was present, but mercifully off limits to her. It wasn't Mom's night, but she was eyeing Matt and Maria. My jaw dropped open. My brother and stepsister were dancing together, and not just dancing, dancing. I wanted to believe this was something innocent, just a boy having some fun with a girl who sold pine nuts, but the body language said otherwise. I was annoyed and jealous. We had all grown up together. Why was Maria getting this sort of attention I craved from boys? And why was the boy who was giving her the attention Matt? Could it be that Matt and Maria were attracted to each other? Maria was our stepsister. Why hadn't I known anything about this before tonight? Anthony asked me to dance again, but this time I said no thank you, turned and slowly made my way towards Mom's bench. Matt and Maria sure are dancing close to each other, Mom said, leaning in so I could hear her over the music. I get the feeling they're liking each other. What do you mean by like? I asked, not wanting to acknowledge what I had seen myself. I mean, I think he wants to go out with her, like on a date. I shrugged. Maria hasn't said anything to me about liking Matt. Well, he better be careful. Maria has a jealous streak just like her mother. He can't marry her, Ruthie. I shook my head as I wondered how Mom had already made such a mental leap. Can you imagine what she'll do when he tries to take another wife? Who says that he wants another wife? Good luck trying to pull the reins in on Maria. I looked at Mom blankly. She put her lips to my ear and cupped her hand over them, leaning in close to say, Lane told me that she's a hellion at home and won't do anything her parents tell her to. Never. Not even after he whips her. The fact that you over here telling her stuff that Lane said when Lane can't even keep his hands off little girls, I'm not trying to hear that. I'm not trying to hear that. Meanwhile, Matt and Maria were oblivious to everyone, including me and Mom. They were still dancing with their arms locked, their heads resting on each other's shoulder. I just stared in disbelief. It is a little weird. I know they're not siblings by, biologically speaking, but yeah, it's a little... Hey, Ruthie, want to dance? Anthony asked again. No thanks, Anthony. I'm not feeling very good. I got up and made my way through the crowded church, feeling as if I were in a movie of someone else's life. Maybe it was Matt and Maria's movie, I thought. As the song ended and they slowly, lazily awoke from their dream, walking hand in hand off the floor, Matt nodded at Mom, who was motioning to him from across the room. He had the good sense to leave Maria behind as he strode across the dance floor, the white tile now heavily scuffed with black boot marks. I could tell from Mom's expression that she was ready to leave, but before she spoke, the band struck up a Mexican two-step. Matt grabbed Mom's hand and pulled her onto the dance floor. She turned giddy, placing her hand delicately on her grown son's shoulder while he put his arm around her mid-back. Her loose-fitting fuchsia polyester dress swung back and forth just below her knees as Matt guided her across the floor, smoothly, expertly. Mom looked delighted. She missed a step from time to time, not having been raised on Mexican music like her children, but in no time Matt had her on track again. My brother's skills as a dance partner impressed me. Obviously, he spent many nights on California dance floors. The entire room seemed to be sighing collectively in appreciation. Mom, feeling the attention, became almost ecstatic. The song grew faster, and so did the twirling. The two of them were soaked in sweat, and Matt, his face now the color of Mom's dress, looked as if he might collapse, but he didn't stop. He seemed to know what that moment meant to her, that she was for once getting a taste, however brief, of the attention and adoration she had always longed for. I hadn't seen this sort of happy expression on her face in years, and it only added to my melancholy. Would I end up like her? I wondered, shackled to a man who appreciated me so little that the only thing that made me feel love was the attention from an adult son. The song ended, and Mom mopped her sweat from her forehead and said something to Matt, who nodded, pulled his truck keys from his pocket, and handed them to her. He wanted to stay and dance some more with Maria, Mom told me during the drive home. Otherwise, it was a silent trip, which was fine with me. I didn't want to talk about Matt and Maria's love affair. How could they have fallen for each other without my knowledge? And how come no one seemed interested in me? My only prospect so far had been one of the church elders, 20 years my senior, who asked Mom's permission to court me. Mom refused, though, not because I didn't like him or because she wanted to protect me from a relationship with an older polygamist, but because he was my first cousin, and she thought that such a marriage wouldn't be advisable in our family, given our history of producing developmentally disabled children. I felt as if I dodged a bullet. I thought about the many LeBaron wives I knew, with their blank, expressionless faces, mindlessly watching after crowds of children. People talked about happiness and love, but I witnessed precious little evidence of it. This is the truth. This is really the truth right here. One thing that we cannot deny is that Ruth has been so honest with us about her life and the things that were going on in it. I appreciate her as an author. I really do. I knew that my life would never be happy if all it amounted to was having several children by a shared husband. I couldn't understand how love or adoration could be possible in that kind of arrangement. And I desperately wanted those things. But I also knew that it wasn't enough to want them. You had to know how to get them. Mom couldn't teach me that because she didn't know herself. She couldn't show me how to be happy, only how to barely survive. And that is where I'm going to end it. I know it's a short reading for a Friday, but this is one of the lighter chapters, and I think we deserve it, and I'm nervous about what might happen next. So that is where I'm going to end it for today. I hope you guys are enjoying these readings so far. We got to start thinking about what our next book is going to be because, look, you guys, we don't got much further to go. If you have any suggestions, put them down below. I think I have one more on my bookshelf that we haven't read yet, but I'm not sure. Either way, still feel free to put down your suggestions below for our next book. And it doesn't necessarily have to be polygamous related. We've done other things as well. Maybe we need a little break because this was heavy. I don't know, but just let me know what you're thinking for next. Until next time.